Good morning, everybody. Hi, it's Thursday again.
Again, imagine that, man.
I
It's
know.
been a fast one, fast week.
I it seems to me that I run around and I do things and I do things and then all of a sudden I'm sitting in front of a screen with you and did that last night, do that this morning again, and it's a beautiful thing, dude. How are you?
It it is. Oh, I am doing great. I mean, we just the guests that we get on our show just keep going up and up. It's
It's
amazing, isn't it?
fantastic. Yeah, that
Yeah.
show last night was fantastic. He's such a
Oh my
great guy,
gosh.
right? Such a great guy.
Yeah. He's my kinda guy, cutting gas caps off of, gas tanks off of cars and then turns around and builds a business, and I knew it. Here's what's funny, I didn't even know. I was like, "Blue collar backers." He's been in the house for 2 months, and I'm just now like, "Oh, that's the." He's on the Discovery Channel, right? So, man, and saying that, you got a rock star today. I
I
can't wait. I won't
do.
introduce her. Won't introduce her. I tell you what I'll do, I'll behave
Thank
and,
you,
set a
sir.
good tone because nobody's in here, and that's what she'll find out. I'm only up here to get that kind of 1 or 2-minute buffer, so when people
Yes,
come in, they see the
exactly.
goodness. I'm
Exactly.
the opening act. Alright, well, young lady, hey, I appreciate you, what you do for the hounds and so many people. You are a
Ditto.
rock star, and thank you for what you do in the
Thank
wheelhouse
you,
for us.
hon. Thank you,
Amazing
hon.
leadership, and, I'll quit singing your praises and let you go ahead and rock on. How about that? We'll call in the hounds too.
Hey, let's roll the intro, dude.
You got it. My pleasure.
Business is no longer only about products and services. More than ever, it's about connection and community. Business is about people. And that's why I created these live events. Every week, join me in discovering one remarkable individual. No shop talk here. It's about who they are and not what they do. My name is Isabel Fortin, and welcome to People, Passion, and Purpose. Guys, every week I tell you this, I'm excited because the people that I have on my show I actually love, but it is particularly true of this wonderful woman who was not only my coach, but she very quickly became my friend. And I love her in both of these roles in my life. Please welcome Andrea Sampson. Hi, Andrea.
Hello, Isabel. I am so excited to be here with you to see your progress. I mean, my God, when we started, what, a year and a half, 2 years ago? I don't even remember. It's been a while.
Yeah,
Um,
2021, October 2021.
so crazy. And look at us. Like you were at that point just trying to decide what you were going to do. And
It
look at
was a
you.
long road.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yes and no. 2021 was, look, everybody was in a place of, I don't know what the heck I'm going to be doing in my life. So I'd say, you had a pretty quick turnaround of figuring it out. And congrats. Like, look at the success that you've created in such a short time.
Thank you. Well, I am on LinkedIn. It is all because of you. I was like everybody else. I thought LinkedIn was just a way to find a job, and I wasn't looking for a job. And I had 43 connections, I think, the first time you spoke to me about LinkedIn. And you were at 40,000 and you've grown 100,000 followers since that day. That is insane to me. That's insane. But I know how much work you put in. I know this is not luck. I know that. But it was great. And you were so crucial, so pivotal in my life, in my professional life, but in my personal life too, Andrea, because it was lost. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know my ass from my elbow anymore. And you were the first stepping stone into identifying what would be what I do today. So I will never thank you enough, and I will never show my appreciation to you enough for your friendship, because you, from the first phone conversation, you tapped into exactly what I needed. And that's not everybody has that.
Yeah.
You're very, very, very special to me, and you're very special, period.
Thank you. Thank you. I feel much the same about you. Watching your progress has been really quite a privilege. And I think that when I think back to that very first phone call, and there were so many synchronicities between you and I, which I think was, this is the way the universe works, right? It
Yes.
brings the right people to you at the right times.
Yes.
And I think that, in that moment, you were searching and I was in transition myself. Like I had,
Mhm.
as you know, I had just bought out my business partner. We had watched our entire business implode because of the pandemic, and we were rebuilding. I was in a place of where from here, and so were you, as you
Yeah.
were exiting from your business. And so we found this common ground. And I mean, I was still doing the work that I had been doing all along, but the business was in that place of
Yeah.
transition. And, since that time, as you know, we've really sort of stepped into the area of thought leadership and what it means to be a thought leader. And that was much of the work that you and I did together, of like really establishing you in that role of a thought leader.
Yeah, and I wasn't an easy client to deal with, and you did it with such brilliance. Seriously, I know myself. I'm not an easy person to deal with. I mean, I'm not unpleasant, but I'm not easy to deal with, and I can be moody. And if I buck up on something, it's, the end is not near. But you were so tactful, and you anyway. So I will never praise what you did and how you did it enough. And I speak about you all of the time, and that will never stop.
Thank you, thank you. Well, I think my observation of you, is not that you were difficult, but that you were actually, and what again, I think we're all mirrors for each other. I think that's really, really important. Is that you were in a place of not knowing, and it was an
Yeah.
uncomfortable place for you,
Yeah.
as it is for most of us.
Yes.
And so when we are in those places where we feel out of control, where we feel that we don't know where we're going, we do get defensive. We do get a little lost, quite frankly. And my job as your coach, and when I'm in these roles of helping somebody through that uncomfortable stage, is to hold the space so that you can step into it, to keep showing you that there is a path in front of you, but you have to be the one who takes the path. And
Yeah.
that was the challenge. And you did. And not everyone does, but you did.
Yeah. Well, if you're going to hire a professional, then be coachable,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's
Exactly.
okay to be in your resistance. It's okay to have a human reaction. It's okay to, especially if you hired the right person for you, which I obviously did, that understands how you vibe and how you think and how you resonate and when to push and when to lay off a little bit. And I remember, and I absolutely want to share that story because it is such a testament to who you are. But I remember I had been working and working and working, and I felt hopeless. I felt like I was never going to find my path. I was never going to find my way. And I had to deliver you the speech that I had been working on, and you said, okay, so go ahead. And I was so not ready for it. Like I was overwhelmed with a sense of panic, which is not a feeling I often get. I tend to have a little bit more of a controlled demeanor, and I panicked, and I was freaking out. And right away, you saw it. You recognized that in me, and you said, Isabel, let's stop this. Let's schedule another meeting, and let's do that. Let's, take the time to settle. And that's exactly what I needed at that moment. But not everybody has the ability to see that and to say, hey, this is not the right time to push. And I find that often coaches are like, all right, let's go, push through, push through.
Yeah.
The best way out is through. Yeah, but sometimes you need a step back. And
Well,
sometimes I was just go ahead.
yeah, I was going to say, like, the thing about that, I work with so many people who are in that state of transition. And, so many of them are already very successful. And
Mm,
when you get to that place where you are now growing, and for many of us of a certain age, growth is something that we did when we were younger, and we get to a plateau and we get comfortable. And, suddenly we find ourselves having to grow, maybe because you've changed careers or you've made a conscious choice, or maybe you haven't made a conscious choice, but the choice has been made for you. And now you have to grow, like, because that's what happens if we don't listen to the signs we're getting. It'll get the decisions will get made for us. So in those moments where you are in that state of discomfort, if I, as your coach, am not listening intently, am not feeling into where you are, I can put you into a state of panic.
mm-hmm,
And that's not good, because what that's going to do is a setback.
mm,
And my job is to hold the space for you, and I'm a communications coach, right? And so and that I go beyond communications, like, even though, yes, that is my main area, but what I've learned over the many years is that when we start talking about your story is you. And we get defined by the stories we tell ourselves, right? So what story, in the moment for you, and when we got to that point where you were like, I can't do this, why? Because you were telling a story that was challenging who you were.
yeah.
I was pushing you. And if you recall the story we were working on,
I resisted.
you did not want to tell that story
No.
because it was revealing
Yeah.
who you had identified as being and who you were leaving behind. So I knew you had to get there. So if I had pushed you, and I could have said, just say it out loud. What would have happened is it would have created trauma for you, and we would have gone backwards and not forwards. So
Yeah.
instead, I knew. And so, I do this with my clients. It's the feeling into it, not the prescriptive, here's what you now need to do. And I work with so many A-type personalities where they're like, just tell me what to do. And I can be A-type myself, but I step back and I go, you know what? We're just going to feel this right now. And it makes people so uncomfortable. And that's what, and I know you are a feeling person, but in that moment, you did not want to feel.
No. No. And it was um and I'm gonna go for it, and I'm gonna come back, but you've opened the door, and I don't mind sharing it now. I don't mind it anymore. Um, the story that you were encouraging me, because I never felt pushed. The story that you were encouraging me to share was the story about my mother's death when I was 5. And now, fast forward from October of 2021 to March of 2024, I just recently, actually yesterday, finished a chapter in the book, a collaborative book, and that's exactly the story that I share.
Mm.
And none of this none of this happens without Andrea in my life, because you opened that door. And I remember you were so tactful, because I had shared a story, like in the original speech that I was working on. I had shared a story about my dog, and something that had happened with him, that cold winter. And instead of saying, well, that's not the story you should tell, you went about it the other way. You said, the story works, Isabel. It works. It goes to your point. It's a good story. It works in what you're trying to convey. I think it would be better with that. And by being so tactful, for me, that was just an invitation. And it was a long road. I know 3 years is not long in the lifespan, but for me, it was a long road to say, you're right. The story that defines my life is my mother's death. And if I really truly want to reach people, I have to show that. And that's what I did. And that's, again, all because of you. And I don't want to, if you have something to add, go ahead. But
Oh, go ahead.
I do, thank you. I do want to start this interview because we're 15 minutes in.
Yeah.
I never let my guests talk so much about business, but it was crucial and so important for me to pay tribute to what you did in my life, both personal and professional. So for me, there was no way around that part. So my first question, Andrea, is always the same one for every guest. Dead or alive, which person in your life that you actually knew has had the most most influence on you, and why?
I two people come to mind. So one is my mom, and the other one is her sister, my aunt. And I've had the benefit of being around very strong women all of my life. My family, there were a lot of women in my life, and they were all very strong. And my mother was such an influence for me. She, I think both negative and positive, quite frankly. I loved her dearly. She died in 22, and it was difficult.
Yeah.
Of course, mother dying is always difficult, but I think what happened for me in watching her die and seeing that was I started to understand the influence she had had on me. And what I saw was that she gave me the ability to see myself bigger than I was. She always said to me, there is no such thing as impossible. You can do anything you want. And she always said to me, don't think that you have to do it the way everybody else does. And I was always a rebel. If somebody told me I couldn't do something, I showed them I could do it. And that was both a help and a hindrance, because I had a therapist once who used this term with me, which was helpful to helpless. And now I understand it, right? That skill, that knowledge of you can do anything was really helpful. And especially because I had a very difficult childhood. And so I needed that reassurance. But at some point it becomes useless. It's useful to useless. And that was the thing that happened, was I started to understand that was holding me back, because I could do things the way other people do it, as well as finding my own way. And so it was really, really important. And the other person was my aunt Edith, who's still alive and who I love dearly. But she was the first woman that I saw growing up who had a career. She worked in PR, and this would have been in the 70s. And she, to me, of course, as a young girl, now I grew up in Halifax, Nova Scotia, small city, but my family was from Cape Breton. And so I spent a lot of my time in very small communities. And my aunt, had this job. She actually was today I couldn't tell you what her job was, but it seemed like she was some sort of a promotional or PR agent for the Blue Nose. She worked, and so she had this job of promoting the Blue Nose, and she was going all over the place, and she was on planes, and she was, it seemed this glamorous life. And I remember thinking, wow, women can do that. Because at the time, I mean, you and I are a similar age.
Yeah.
Think back in those days, what did women do? They were teachers, they were nurses,
Or secretaries.
or secretaries, and that was kind of what was open to you.
Yeah.
And for me to see this, this beautiful woman, who had taken life by storm and who was living by her own terms. And, she was a single mom as well. She had been married and divorced, and she had a young son. And I just remember thinking, wow, that's possible for me. And so really, really inspired, with my mom telling me I could do anything, and then having this role model of my aunt who, was actually this just a couple of years older than my oldest sister, because there's quite a large age gap between me and my oldest sister. So it was very influential, and that really became for me a North Star of who I wanted to be.
And did you get there? Did you, like, looking back to what you aspired to be, not do, but to be, and with both these women's influence, did you get to that, being that person?
I did, and I think what in retrospect, as I look back, um, is that and your question is be, not do. And I
Yes.
think that was something that I had to learn. I had to
Yeah.
learn to be and not to do, because that was, I think, when I, again, especially being a woman, being a young girl who grew up in the 70s, coming into myself in the 80s, coming into my adulthood in the 80s,
Mhm.
it was all about doing. It was
Yes.
all about doing. And, the year that I turned 50, which was in 2015, and I remember having that thought of who am I, and where from here? Because as I looked back at the goals that young girl had made, who was, so, stars in my eyes, wanting to be a success, wanting to show the world that I could be who they didn't think I could be, of pushing against every convention that was being put in my way. And, I spent most of my career in advertising. And by the time I turned 50, I was a senior vice president of strategy for a very large agency. I was, by all accounts, incredibly successful, except by my own, because I was not doing, or I was not being the person I wanted to be.
Yeah.
And that was what happened for me at 50, was I looked back and said, well, I've had the job, I've had the title, I've made the money, I've got the recognition, I've done all of those things that somewhere someone told me, or in some way I thought was necessary, that was what the definition of success was. And what happened for me was I thought, well, that actually means nothing in the grander scheme of things. Because for me, what I really understood in that moment was, look, we only have a limited time on this planet. The reality is each of us has an expiry date at some
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
And as I look around in this beautiful planet, I want to make a difference in some way. And so it was at that moment that I recognized that I had to shift from the doing, the success driven approach, to really deciding who I wanted to be in the world. And in doing that, still understanding how I wanted to live and what I wanted. And so it's been a learning experience, and I still learn every day in this, and it's a balancing act as well, like, because you're always going, we live in a world where doing is valued. And
Yes.
so it's hard.
You're so right. There's so much um recognition in action, recognition in, well, she's the VP of whatever, and but we are more than that. And being, right? It's being what you're meant to be, or who you want to be, because that's the thing that I find people forget, is you choose your identity. You choose it every day. You choose what you do. You choose how you react to situations. You choose how you react to people. You choose. That's a choice. And it's the burden of choice because it's both a blessing and a burden, right? So
Absolutely.
that's it. That's beautiful. Was there a aha moment that made you realize that? Or it was just, well, I'm 50 now, and I've got all these things, yet I don't feel satisfied. Like, how did that come about for you?
Yeah, I think it was like it came about. I was at the time I was living in a house in the suburbs of Toronto. My daughter, my only child, had just gone off to university. I think it was her second year, and I started asking myself, of what am I doing?
Mm,
Um, and I thought, the previous year I had spent a lot of time really thinking about the career that I'd created. And I was deeply unhappy. I
mm,
really did not enjoy it. And I always like to say, I had a moment, I think, in my career in advertising where I looked around and I recognized that when I went into advertising, I had thought that I could, use my desire to make a difference in the world with this incredible medium. I mean, let's face it, it's very, very influential. And, 25 years in, I was like, you know what? It's not going to happen. Like, at the end of the day, we were still selling things, and nothing against advertising. I mean, there's lots of
yeah,
people who love doing it. But for me, I recognized I was an idealist in a capitalist world. And I needed to get out. I needed to, walk away from the capitalism that I was actually promoting and do something else. And so I had spent the previous year going to a whole bunch of conferences, and I did it kind of unconsciously. I knew I wanted to expand myself. And so I just started going to random conferences that looked interesting. I remember one that I went to was called the World Domination Summit. And I was like, well, that sounds interesting. I should go to that. And I did. And I went to I went to a bunch of creativity conferences, and one of the ones that I went to was TEDx Toronto, and this was in the very, very early days of the TEDx movement, and I was blown away. And so two things happened at once. One was this recognition of I was an idealist in this capitalist world, and that had to change. And I got hired as a speakers coach for TEDx Toronto. And I didn't even know what a speakers coach was, quite frankly. I had never heard of it. But what I knew was that I presented all the time. And I loved TED. I was like, I was always inspired by TED videos. And so I thought, well, if I can be a part of this would be really amazing. And this is a long answer to your short question,
it's
but
okay.
what happened for me was that in that first year of working on TEDx Toronto is that I started working with individuals who were doing incredible work in the world, scientists, academics, technologists, even artists. And they were doing work that was actually shaping and changing our world. And when you work in advertising, you think you know a lot because you're always on the cutting edge of everything,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
You really are. And
yeah.
so I really didn't think I would learn anything, incredibly new. I knew I would learn things, but not things that would be like totally new to me in the TED world. Well, I was blown away by what
Mm,
happened because I saw a different world, literally. Because again, when we think about the world we live in, it's shaped by the stories that we tell, but shaped by the stories that we're told. And
yes.
so where do we get our stories? Well, you open a newspaper, you turn on CNN, you go to YouTube, you go wherever you go, you're being told a story about the world you live in. And usually the story we're being told is not a good one,
No.
right? And here I was working with the people who were actually doing the work and creating a new world, a world that I actually had no access to because I was living in the world of media, which was
Mm,
telling me the world was going to hell in a handbasket. And yet I had the proof with the people I was working with that it wasn't. And not only that it wasn't, that there was so much good happening in the world that I didn't even know about, that I knew I had to change that. And so for me, this realization was it was part of the TED world of like, holy cow, these are amazing people doing amazing things and no one knows about it. And they're not going to tell anyone because they're so busy doing the work. They don't have time to tell anyone. And if they do, no one understands them because they speak, quite frankly, a different language than most of us. They speak tech or they speak science or they speak academic. And so, and then I learned that I had this skill I didn't know I had, which was being able to translate for them. And so that gave me a little inkling. It started to go, huh, I wonder. And the second thing that happened was my own mortality kicked in. And I went, you know what? I got, like at 50, you go, look, I got more years behind me than ahead of me. If I'm
Yes.
lucky, I got 40 or 50 years left on the planet. I'm pretty optimistic, clearly. But even if I end up with that many years ahead of me, they're not all going to be good. I'm
No.
not going to be in a place where I can make change. And so I recognized it was now or never. And so that was for me the catalyst of really shifting and changing my life. And within a very short period of time, I sold my house in the suburbs. I, relocated myself into a much more contained environment. I traveled and I had to decide what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And it was at that point that I opened my business and took a chance that somebody would actually pay me to be a speaker's coach, which I quite frankly didn't believe they would, because up until that point, all my speaking coaching had been for free. I'd been, doing it as a volunteer.
Yeah. It's always I think that the people that are the most surprised by the things that people are willing to pay us to do is us. It's like,
Totally.
because if you actually take your natural abilities and your unique abilities and make a living out of it, you go, why are these people giving me money for this? Because this is easy. But I think that in some parts it's supposed to be that way. It's just that we are so trained from a young age, and I think it is changing now, and thank goodness it is. But we're so trained that like work is hard and you play hard and everything has to be hard. I'm not about hard. And I mean, of course, owning a business, there are difficult days, there are difficult moments, and sometimes you have to take difficult decisions, of course. But the nature of your business, if you find it hard, you're in the wrong business.
Yeah.
So I totally get what you're saying. Totally get what you're saying. And I loved the entire answer, even if you consider it was too long for a short question. My second question, because I don't ask that many, my second question is, have you, other than work, I know as entrepreneur, we take, we just said that we take what we're good at, we take what we're passionate about, and we make a living out of it. But other than your work, what is or are your passions and how did you discover them?
Oh gosh. I'm a passionate person. And when I really start thinking about it, I'm like, wow, I actually do a lot. Um, I think one of my other passions, first of all, is spirituality. I have been a deeply, deeply spiritual person um, for many, many years. And when I talk about spirituality, it's not religion. It is about understanding the origins of me and the origins of us as souls. And
Yes.
I have done a lot of deep, deep work in that area, and I continue to. I,
Mhm.
for many years, have run goddess groups, which I love. And we do celebrations as through the year, and we honor the earth, and I think as women, this is one of the things that we need to do more of because we live on this amazing planet, this Gaia, which is the mother to us all. And so this is a passion of mine, and it's one that is important, and it's sort of come in and out of my life through the years. And as I started my business, I had to take a bit of a step back from it as I was I think, redefining me. I had to decide whether
Mm.
my spiritual practice was going to be something that I was going to take with me. And, I can happily say it is, and it is so deeply important to me. And so that was that's a passion of mine. But I have many others, and I think another one that comes up more so now than it ever did was my own creativity.
Mm.
I spent most of my career, as I said, in advertising, and I would never have said I was a creative person. When you work with, artists, and many of the people within the, ad industry are truly artists, um,
Yes.
you compare yourself, which is, of course, the worst thing any of us can do. But
Yes.
it is a highly competitive industry, and there's a lot of people within it who would have you believe you are less than who you are. And so I bought into that. And so I never believed that I was creative.
Mm.
And I think I had a lot of people who would tell me I was creative. I mean, I started making jewelry many, many years ago. And it was a bit of therapy for me. And I just did it. I didn't take courses. I just started making jewelry, and people would literally buy it off of me. I would be wearing something and they'd ask me about it. I'd say I made it, and they would be like, "Do you sell it? Can I buy that?" And I would be like, "If you want, I guess," you know. And but again, I would have never said I'm creative. It was just,
Mm.
I had this little thing I did. But what happened for me during COVID, and you and I were talking about this earlier, is I took up crocheting. And it it was interesting for me because crocheting, I think I crocheted as a kid,
Yeah. Yeah.
probably
Yeah.
all did, right? My
Yeah.
grandmother used to knit and crochet, and she was incredibly gifted at it. Um, but it was not something I ever thought I wanted to do. Well, two things happened simultaneously. One, I took up crochet, and two, I learned I was neurodiverse. And what happened was, in learning that, I started to understand a connection. When you are crocheting, there's a hand movement that happens. And as a neurodiverse person, part of what happens is you have a lot of energy in your body that needs to move through. And so we'll often see, autistic people sort of shaking their hands. Well,
Yeah.
that's what's called stimming. And crochet is actually a socially acceptable way to stim. And so I was like, well, that's interesting, isn't it? But at the same time, this creativity really started flowing through me, and
Yes.
it opened up another world for me. And I mean, I am like totally addicted to crochet. Like anything I do in my life, I cannot do it in a small way. So I do have a yarn room, I will admit it. Uh, and I have far too many crochet garments to even talk about. I do need to open a store because it's getting a little out of hand. I'm not going to, but I've really tapped into my inner creativity, and that is a real passion. So, spirituality, creativity, and I think many more things will come from that, because is um, it is something that really helps me to
Mhm.
see myself as a whole person, and not as just this person who shows up and can be smart or can be helpful. It just lets me be me.
And that's so important. It's so important to find something, regardless of what it is, that connects us to our joy and connects us to our inner world and inner and you and I, we shared a crochet thing. For me, yes, creativity is extremely important, and I hone into my creativity, and I've always had, well, maybe less in the military, but after that, um, for me, crocheting gives me the result of my work right now. And I am so extremely result oriented.
Yeah.
And in this shifting my career, building something from the ground up and not seeing instant result, because we don't, that's the truth. It was satisfying my brain, right? It was satisfying my brain to say, you took yarn, you did stuff with your hand, and now it's a toque. And I
Yeah.
was like, I now have a toque. So yeah, but creativity, and we need these moments in our lives where we are just in, I call that being in the flow. We're
Yes.
just in the flow. We're just being. We're not thinking about anything. We're not planning the next meeting, the next schedule. Then we're not. We're just here now, and that's all I'm doing right now. And the more we allow this to take place in our lives, and the easier we find uh, solutions in our work, in our lives, in everything else. So that's so important. And going back to your spirituality, of course, no, spirituality and religions are two different things. But I think that more and more, anyways, maybe that's just because that's the way I am. So that's what I attract. But I meet more and more people who actually run their business with their beliefs and their values and their spiritual lives in mind.
Mhm.
Because when you tap into that, you can't get out of it anymore.
Mhm.
So that's so important.
Well, I
I
think
have,
that,
go ahead.
yeah, I think that, one of the things again is being, when we combine, um, you know, these parts of our lives, right? Our business life and our personal life, our spiritual life, what we do is we show up as a whole person.
Yes.
And we're not trying to hide, like, and I never did, like, even in advertising, people would come, I always had people in my office. Why? I had a deck of tarot cards sitting on my desk all the time. People would be coming in to draw a card, and these are people who would never, like, they'd come in and they'd be like, oh, you have tarot cards, and they'd be a little afraid, and I'd be like, yeah, sure. You want to draw a card? Oh my God. Well, like, will it tell me something bad? I'm like, no. I mean, it might tell you that you've got some bad energies around you, but it's not going to tell you you're going to die, and I would explain to people what tarot is. And it's a divination system that just reads energies as they are right now. And so, you can change it. You've got free will. We always have free will. So
Yes.
what it's doing is it's giving you a little bit of a foresight into where you're going. And if you don't like where you're going, you should probably change that.
Change it. Yeah. Exactly. Change it. It's never too late. Exactly. I started this show, Andrea, because in my LinkedIn journey, I obviously have met people from all over the world, from all walks of life, entrepreneurs, employees, people with a lot of, a lot of heart-centered people. And the question that gets to be asked or sneak in the conversation within the first 5 minutes has to do with purpose. So either I'm realizing that people are just started to take their purpose and make it their business so that they can make money with it, or they're looking for it and they're looking for a coach that's going to help them define it or find it or redefine it or whatever. So that's how I came up with this live podcast every week, because I think that all of heart-centered people that I know, you being one of them, obviously, need to know what our purpose is. So my question is, have you found your life's purpose? And if so, how?
Yeah, I think I have. I mean, look, we never really know these things because, we're still living and we're still working on them. But, for me, I think the thing and it goes back to that moment in when I turned 50 of, like, really understanding that I wanted to contribute to creating a better future. And that was for me really, really clear that, I recognized that, um, we are at a pivotal time in the evolution of humanity right now. And because of that, there are a lot of really important people who are doing important work in this world. And I wanted to contribute to that work. And I wanted to, in some way, add my own mark to that. And so for me, I do what I do. I am who I am because what I want to be able to do is to create a collection of voices that are creating the future, because that's what we're doing, right?
Yes.
Every one of us is in some way contributing, either negatively or positively, to the future that we will have. But we're doing it often by default because we don't know that we're doing that. We think our voice makes no difference. We hear that, oh, every voice makes a difference. Well, for me, I've really understood that on a whole different level, because now what I can see is I work with such incredibly smart people, and everything from quantum physicists to roboticists to people who are working on some of the world's biggest problems, and I got to see how they became who they are. And the way that they became who they are is somebody else influenced them. And
Yes.
so, my job, my purpose is to give voice to those who think they don't have a voice. And the way that I do that is I help them to find what it is that's unique in their being and putting that into the world. Now, that could be at a community level. Maybe they are simply talking to the people around them. Great, because you're going to inspire somebody. Maybe it's at an industry level and they're inspiring entire industries. Maybe it's at a country level and they're inspiring entire countries. It doesn't matter where you're speaking. What matters is that you are speaking, and you're speaking what only you know, because only you have had the experiences that you've had. Now, you might be an expert. Maybe you are a quantum physicist, but the way that you see quantum physics is going to be different from every other quantum physicist out there because of your background. Maybe you grew up on the wrong side of the tracks. Maybe your parents died when you were young. Maybe you were born with a silver spoon in your mouth and you had to learn how everybody else. Doesn't matter. The thing is, the way you come at it is different from anyone else. And because of that, you're making what it is you do accessible to more people, which will inspire those people to find their message. And together, we're now creating a possible future, not somebody else's preferred future.
I remember one of the first times that we worked together, and that resonated with me, and that is still something that I apply today. Is I said, yeah, but Andrea, I can't even remember what I was talking about, but I said, yeah, but Andrea, there are literally thousands, hundreds of thousands of books on this subject. And you looked at me in the camera like this and you said, but none of them are written by you. And I thought, yeah, because you are right. You were right. You're right now. Because you can read a book on the same subject from 10 or 20 different authors, and you're going to draw something from each and every one of these books because they are not written the same way. They are not, the language changes, the intention changes. And it is, we do connect with the intentions of the author when we read something. So is your cat playing tricks on you?
You know what? I just got a message that my battery is about to die on my Mac, and I'm like,
Oh
wait a
my
minute,
God.
why is
Take
it not
your
plugged
time.
in? I
Take your
think
time. Hey,
there we
Mike,
go.
while Andrea is looking for her thing, Mike, put the question on there's a question from the audience. Exactly. From Samuel. And earlier, I wasn't paying well, I was paying attention, but I wasn't looking at you because I was reading the question. And I don't know, my focals aren't, and I'm, telling the world I'm in my 50s. My focal wasn't well adjusted, so it took longer to read. And Mike is literally texting me in the chat, pay attention. She's talking. So, question for Andrea, what is one thing that you have seen in a lot of people that requires change? Well, first of all, Samuel, thank you for being here. Thank you for your question. Andrea?
You know what? And I think the thing that I see in a lot of people that requires change is that they don't believe in themselves. You
Oh,
know,
beautiful.
that it is, I think the thing that, and we all think that somebody else is way more confident than we
Mm,
are. And I got to tell you, like I said, I have worked with some of the most powerful and influential people in our world, and they still get imposter syndrome. They are still questioning whether what they're saying is valuable, is right, is, and that word right is the thing that I actually want us all to remove from our language,
yes.
because there is no right and wrong.
Yeah.
There is no right and wrong. There is only closer to or farther from your destination. And so when you are in an academic field, as an example, there you get a lot of people trying to prove you wrong. And so there's always this sort of like, because it's a very competitive world.
Yes.
And what I like to do is pull them back and go, if you've done your work, if you've done the research, really what you could, what you're saying to your audience is, this is one way of looking at it. And this
Yes.
is where it will take you. Do this and it'll take you here. So that idea of, I need to prove it. I don't know as much as I know. Somebody else knows more than me. I'm not the right person for this. That is the piece that I want people to start to understand,
Mhm.
that they don't need to be the best, the most, the most right. That it really is about showing up in your state of being, because only I can be me. Only I can say the things that I'm saying. And if you don't agree with them, that's okay. That's okay. And I actually want to hear your point of view.
Yeah.
So and this is the piece that I really talk a lot to my clients about, is don't worry about whether or not what you're saying is 100% right, as long as you believe in it, and as long as what you're bringing is who you are. There is no right and wrong. And look, again, I'll come back to quantum physics. That keeps telling, like, all the facts we thought we knew, they're not
Yeah.
anymore, right? So there is no such thing. It's just
No.
all a perspective. That's it.
Yes.
So so show up believing what you believe. Don't worry about defending it. Be open and be curious, and that changes the conversation.
I could not have asked a better question to end the show. I yes, Melissa, the her YouTube is in the show notes somewhere, or you can say, Andrea, what's your
Yeah.
YouTube channel?
It's the Thought Leader Academy.
Okay.
Is my YouTube channel, and it's the Thought Leader Academy with Andrea Sampson. We just launched it. Although
Yeah.
there's a fair amount there, we actually repurposed my. I used to have one through Talk Boutique, and we've changed it. So we've
Okay.
changed the format. So it's just launched. There's new material being put up every week, and we do lives like this. We also have lives on LinkedIn every second week. Next week, I'm live with a really interesting person, Anita Stubenraw, who we're going to talk about branding. So it's a really fun. Actually, we're talking. In fact, and it's a really, I think, I know you would love this one. We're talking about the multi-hyphenate individual.
Oh my. Okay.
I
So
know.
I'm
Is that
gonna
a great?
go check that out
Yeah.
and click attend for sure. That's
So yeah.
That's wonderful. I always end my live with the same way. I give the opportunity to my guests to ask me anything they want. You don't have to, but do you have a question for me, my dear friend?
I do. So
I
Isabel,
was afraid of that.
when am I seeing you on a stage? Tell me.
Oh, as soon as humanly possible. I it's been I'm not gonna lie, Andrea. You know this. You've been part of my journey. It hasn't been an easy road for me, and I was in my way every step of the way. I resisted a lot of things because it was forcing me. I don't like that word, but for lack of a better one, I'll say forcing me to show up all of the vulnerable sides of me, and I wasn't accustomed to that because, as you were saying earlier, your mother teaching you that you were able to stand outside the box. It is also okay to be in the box sometimes, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the persona that I had then, the military chick and the entrepreneur and the business, the business owner and the girl in charge, she had to take a step back, and she didn't go willingly. So it was a struggle. It really was a struggle. And I am actually I've just rebranded, and now I truly, truly know that I am on the right path to it's not about the message, it's about who I'm addressing the message to. So I hope to God it's going to be really, really, really soon. And I actually ran a 6 weeks program with Bobby Umar that from Toronto.
Oh, yeah, of course. I know
Yeah,
Bobby.
yeah, and I loved working with Bobby. And we ran a 6 weeks program on how to get a TEDx talk. So obviously he's had 5. So he was talking more about the who do you contact and how you do that. And I was talking about the mindset. And it goes back to what you were saying. Whatever you believe about yourself, you're right. If you believe you're incapable, you're incapable. If you believe you have no value to add to the world, it's sad, but you're right. Because as soon as you change your mindset and you see that you do have value, and that your perspective is completely different from the other 8 billion people on this planet, and that even if your message is the same as your neighbor's message, the way that you're going to share it with the world has value, and some people are going to connect with that and not connect with the neighbors. When you understand that, then you know that your voice matters.
Mhm.
So it was a long, long, long road. And I am working extremely hard on giving myself grace. I'm good at giving other people grace, a little bit less at giving myself grace. And I hope that I'm going to be on stage really soon, because that was our first conversation, Andrea. I belong on stage.
Yes.
That's
Yes,
where
you
I
do.
belong. That is where I excel. And I recently I did an interview where I was the guest, and the person asked me, so 10 people or 1,000 per people, and I said, well, for 10 people, I do an okay job. For 1,000, I will be exceptional, because it feeds me,
Of course.
right?
Yeah, of course.
So, and as soon as I have to get ready for my first TEDx, I'm calling you so that I
I
can
know where to find me.
yeah, so I can work at it and get my message as effective and as unique, because I know that that's what you bring, that you're going to tap into and make me make me tap into my unique abilities and to show it to the world. And you started that journey with me, and you're going to be there till the finish line, man.
Well, I look forward to that. I absolutely look forward to it. And I will
Hey.
be in the front row watching you.
Oh, you're so sweet. Guys, we've ran an hour because this woman is so interesting. Uh, Andrea, we've been putting your stuff all across on the banners from the entire show, but I do want you to have this moment to say, what do you do? How can you help people? And how do we get a hold of you?
Sure. So, as you saw, so you can, follow me on LinkedIn, check out my YouTube channel. You can go to the thoughtleaderacademy.info, which is where you'll find our programs if you're interested in working with us.
And
And
you should.
we help people transform into we take experts and change makers, we transform them into thought leaders by helping them to become storytellers so they can create the influence, impact, and income that they want. So that's what we do in a nutshell. Isabel, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for inviting me.
It was my Absolute pleasure. And hey, one day it'll be me sitting on that seat for you.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Guys, see us, catch us next week. Same bad time, same bad channel. Thursday morning, 10 Eastern. My guest next week is a fabulous person. Her name is Sierra, and I can't wait to introduce her to the world because she deserves it. And Mike, thank you, dude, for running the back end as usual. Bye, guys. I'll catch you
Bye,
next week.
everyone.